Good morning, everybody. It is great to see you on this beautiful day where it's extremely cold, but it's wonderful to see you and have a chance to connect with you like this. I encourage you to share your thoughts and your ideas all through this morning as we're together online. This is meant to be a collaborative community where we work together to learn and to grow and all of these things. Look behind me, you guys. I want to show you. My office is so piled up with food. It's out in the hallway. It's everywhere. See if I got myself back in the center here. It's everywhere. We have been blessed with so much food to give away. It's absolutely extraordinary. We're grateful beyond belief, and we're so grateful for your continued support with your time, your energy, and your gifts. So many ways. It's extraordinary, truly. In fact, we have so much food that we have to add Tuesday nights. And we have to is one way to say it, but we get to. And so starting this coming Tuesday, we'll have an additional giveaway. We're calling it a bread and bakery because that's most of what we'll have, although we'll have other things to move as well. On Tuesday evenings now, too, from 6 to 7 p.m. I encourage you to find the post about that on social media and share it. Please like it and share it and spread the word. Spread the word about our Friday food giveaway as well because we have had such a huge abundance for the last weeks. We need to move it and we want to give it to people so that they can have more of what they need. Just in awe over the whole thing. So I just encourage you to like and share the posts and to get involved anywhere you can. It's awesome to be in the stream of God's loving generosity. And so would you pray with me? Gracious God, bless this time that we have together this morning. Inspire us with your unfailing love. In Jesus' name, amen. So this week, I had the opportunity, as many grandparents do, to spend time with two littles, age 3 and 7. I don't get to see them as often. I'm definitely the distant grandma because I work hard and everybody's busy. And so when I get to spend time with them, it is super precious to me. The thing about it, though, is when we get to spend more than a few hours here and there and like days together, is that they're kids. And at some point, even though I really just want to buy them ice cream and give them all the candy and let them jump on the bed and do whatever they want, at some point, you have to offer some guidance. That's not as much fun. Some of you who are, maybe if you're a parent or a grandparent, or if you ever babysat kids for any length of time, you know it's not as much fun to have to offer guidance. And so uh, you have to do that sometimes. And what's hard about it is, as with kids, grandkids, whoever it is, you hope that they know that the guidance you're offering is because you love them. You hope they know that. You hope they have bonded with you in a way that they know they're attached, in a way that they know that you love them. And that's why you're offering this correction right now, because otherwise it might seem a little bit like, why are you understand, you've all been corrected by a parent or someone. But you know how if you know they love you, it's a little easier to absorb, especially as you get older. Well, of course that came up this week, because you can't take the time to share with them that you love them every single time. Otherwise, it might be like this. I love you a lot, and I'll never stop loving you, and you're just an amazing person. And I can't wait to see who you become when you grow up. I look forward to being a part of your life. I just adore you like so much it hurts. However, at this moment, you may not run 100 yards ahead with a very powerful but kind hearted dog who hates squirrels and rabbits holding their leash, because if they see a squirrel or a rabbit, they will run, and either you will let go of them or you will get drug a mile on the sidewalk on your face by your lips. So please don't run ahead with the dog, because I love you and I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want the dog to get away. At some point, you just have to say, stop, stop. And you can't always preface things with, I know you love your sister and we're all working, together to develop great community and teach you how to be good people. So please don't pinch your sister. Sometimes you just have to say, hey, stop, don't pinch your sister, knock it off. Do you follow me? And you hope that they know that you're making rules like you can't climb on top of the fridge because you love them. And sometimes you got to be a little bit direct for a multitude of reasons. I'm waiting for any of you who are parents or grandparents to relate to me on this. I'm kind of hanging myself out here. This is just how this works, or anybody who's spent time with people who you need to offer guidance to in that way. See, I think as people on this earth, this whole notion that God loves us gets lost in what we perceive the rules are, in the corrections and the directions. And although throughout the Old Testament, God goes overboard to explain love, and Jesus certainly in the New Testament to explain that God is love, people still get caught up in, in the rules pieces of it. And they might miss that the intent underneath all of it is love. And I think that was the intent for Jesus to even be born on the earth and to do and say what he said. And I think that was the intent for all of God's instructions all through history and time, everything we have recorded in the Bible. Although I do think that there are things recorded in the Old Testament that may not reflect what God actually instructed, i.e., the violent kinds of things and such. Like maybe somebody gave God credit for something that God actually didn't instruct, or they got it wrong in some way. But the message of love is throughout the whole narrative. It's throughout all the stories. It's throughout the birth of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the life of the church. And it's all about love and loving community through the whole thing. Even if we get caught up in the details and the rules, it's really, truly love underneath. I want to talk with you about that a little bit today. Um, and so last week I ended the message with these questions. I started and ended with these questions. So why do you think Jesus came to this earth? And we addressed these two things. Jesus did not come to entertain us, and Jesus did not come just to die. And if you're curious about that, watch last Sunday. And if you're still curious about it, call me up, email me, and I'll do my best to talk with you about how I came to these conclusions. You may disagree, but I'd love to share more with you if you're confused about all this. And I want to say this next step of this, because I think it's important for us to think about. In that same vein, Jesus did not come just to save our souls for heaven. If we make it all about that, then it's very transactional and not so much relational. And while it would be loving to save our souls for heaven, it doesn't seem very loving that only a small percentage of people end up being saved for heaven. It's a confusing thing. So I'm convinced that Jesus did not come just to save our souls for heaven. Jesus had a much greater purpose than that. I think Jesus intended to affect how we live now. And I think that's what God was doing all through the Old Testament with the law and the prophets. So, why did Jesus come to earth? Well, I want you to listen to how the writer of the Gospel of Matthew quotes Jesus. And this, because Jesus will tell you right in the beginning of this Sermon on the Mount what he's doing. Right after he does the famous Beatitudes that we've been working on for months, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the humble, all those things. Right after that, and then after telling people that they are the salt of the earth and the light of the world, Jesus says this. We're in Matthew 5:17 through 20 from the Message. He says, don't suppose for a minute that I have come to demolish the scriptures, either God's law or the prophets. I'm not here to demolish, but to complete. Fulfill is another way that it's said. Let's look at this for a minute. Now, I want to tell you, I know I preached on this on November 17th. I'm sure you all remember. I knew I did because I wasn't very happy with how I handled this that day. And so I got to go back to it and hopefully complete some more things. By the way, a trailer just pulled up with more food in it. Anyway, so what does Jesus mean here by saying I came to complete the law and the prophets. I came to fulfill it. I want to look at this. Matthew 5:17 and other translations will help us to understand, because the word fulfill and complete are just not complete enough to explain what Jesus was probably saying. What does Jesus mean by complete the law? Well, a couple other translations say it like this: to bring about what the law and prophets said, to do what they said, to accomplish their purpose. And I believe the purpose was love. Even more, to give the law and the prophets their full meaning, to make what they taught to become true, to make them all come true. So all those laws were intended to make love come true. And this is very, very important for Jesus to preface his teaching with this, to say, look, when we talk about law, we're talking about love. We're talking about love. And although in this time you may have gotten caught into law, just obeying the law, its whole intent was love. And we need to talk about that. And it's super important because right at the beginning of Jesus' teaching, to set this straight, because what he will say through the remainder of the Sermon on the Mount are things like this: you have heard it said, where he references some law or some diversion of not diversion, iteration of the law, addition to the law. You have heard it said this, but I say to you. He's not negating what they heard before. In effect, he is helping them contextualize it for their time and reminding them of why that law was ever said in the first place. Jesus wants them to know, I believe this, that he intends to help them remember, or maybe for the first time understand the reason for the law, so that they can contextualize it for their time and live into its intent, which is love. That may be a very controversial thing for you to hear, but I believe that. I believe Jesus wanted to contextualize the law for their time because it had been written a long 1,000 years prior. I think Jesus was saying, in this day and age, here's what those rules mean now. And I think that gives us freedom to do the same even now, 2,000 years later. So that's a very controversial thing. I will go further into that at some point, but I want to go further with where we are right now. Jesus wants them to know that he intends to help them remember and understand the reason for the law so they can contextualize it for their time and live into its intent, which is love. See, this is exactly what parents and grandparents are trying to do. Hopefully, maybe not all, but grandparents and parents and aunts, uncles, teachers are trying to help kids understand what it means to live in loving ways to care for yourself and your body, your family, your siblings, your community. What growing up to become a person that thinks of others and does well with others. And so the reason there are rules, the reason there are even processes in place, like even with what we do around Matthew 25, it's all about love, but we have to have processes so that we can do it well. All of those things have to be contextualized for the time. But I think Jesus showed up on the earth to say, hey, look, this is about love. Did you forget? Or did you not know? Let's talk about that further. So let's go back to the text. Jesus says, I'm not here to demolish the law, but to give them their full meaning, to make them all come true, to bring it to fruition. Jesus continues, I'm going to pull it all together. I'm sorry. Oh, I got to pull it all together in a vast panorama. God's law is more real and lasting than the stars in the sky and the ground at your feet. Long after stars burn out and earth wears out, God's law will be alive and working. See, we think of law as negative, but maybe it's just good guidelines. Alive means adapting and working. trivialize even the smallest item in God's law, and you will only have trivialized yourself. Eugene Peterson just does such a beautiful job, I think, with this passage. It makes it so real for us. Because when we step away from the guidance that God is offering, the guidance of love, of goodness, we're really going to shortchange ourselves in this world. So I think this is a really important point. I'm sure I will preach a whole sermon or two, or maybe even three about it again. But let's face it, if you hoard all the wealth in this world, you may think in the short term that it'll be good for you, but in the long term, it would be better for you if you shared. It would be better for all of us if you shared. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not probably speaking to you. I'm probably speaking more to the few billionaires out there, but even so, you hear what I'm saying. It's better for all of us. We don't want to trivialize our lives. It's better for everyone if we listen and follow the laws of love. But take it seriously, Jesus says. Show the way for others, and you will find honor in the kingdom. And then he says, unless you do far better than the Pharisees in the matters of right living, right relationships, you won't know the first thing about entering the kingdom. I hope you're able to see this through the framework of love, because in that day and time, the Pharisees had been so loyal to the law that they might have lost track of love. Because if they had kept the framework of love underneath the law, then they wouldn't have been comfortable with people suffering and starving. They wouldn't have been okay with people being left out because they couldn't afford to purchase the sacrifice needed. Or they were sick, and so they could not possibly become clean enough. The Pharisees would not have been okay with that system that left people out. They must have missed something. So, what Jesus is saying here is that unless you learn to love more than your religious leaders have learned to love, you're going to miss the joy that Jesus is really preparing right now. What love can do in this world. Again, Jesus did not come to entertain us, and Jesus did not come just to die, and Jesus did not come just to save our souls for heaven. Jesus came to impact our lives right now. Jesus came to show us what God intended all along, to show us that the purpose of the law was to help people form those righteous, right relationships in community then and even now. And Jesus was contextualizing the law for their time. In Jesus' time, it seems that people, including the religious leaders, had forgotten or misunderstood the underlying reason for God's law. God's law was written to guide people to loving, healthy community, which is what we all hope for our kids and our grandkids and everyone, to guide people into a healthy, loving community. Jesus came to show us how, to help us get there, and I think give us permission to contextualize again. Look at God's intent for Israel through the law. These are words from the prophets. These are words that Jesus would have known, words that he did not come to abolish, as he said. Listen, this is from Isaiah 42, God's message. The God who created the cosmos, stretched out the skies, laid out the earth and all that grows from it, who breathes life into earth's people, makes them alive with his own life. This is what God says. I am God. I have called you to live right and well. I have taken responsibility for you and kept you safe. I have set you among my people to bind them to me and provided you as a lighthouse to the nations. This is that loving community. It's so filled with hope. It just beckons people. People want to be a part of good things. To make a start at bringing people into the open, into light, opening blind eyes, releasing prisoners from dungeons, and emptying the dark prisons, literally and metaphorically. on every statement. And I want to remind you again of this passage we've been looking at for weeks now from Isaiah 58. We're going to look at just 6 through 10 from the message. When God is speaking these words, God is frustrated with the people of Israel because they are worshiping just in rote behavior. I'm going to say it religiously without understanding the intent underneath. They're missing love even then. And so this is what God says to them. This is the kind of fast day. Fasting was one of the things they did as a religious observance. I'm after. Break the chains of injustice, get rid of exploitation in the workplace, free the oppressed, and cancel debts. I know you've heard this for weeks, but I just can't stop saying it. What I'm interested in seeing you all do is sharing your food with the hungry, inviting the homeless poor into your homes, putting clothes on the shivering ill-clad, being available to your own families. Do this, and the lights will turn on, and your lives together will turn around at once. Your righteousness, right relationships, in other words, how much you love each other and how obvious that is, will pave the way. The God of glory will secure your passage. And when you pray, God will answer. You'll call out for help, and I'll say, here I am. If you get rid of unfair practices, quit blaming victims, quit gossiping about what you think are other people's sins, if you're generous with the hungry and start giving yourselves to the down and out, your lives together will begin to glow in the darkness. Your shadowed lives will be bathed in sunlight. I really believe that God's intent all along, no matter what people gave God credit for throughout the Old Testament, people still give God credit for things today that we can't really reconcile with love. Despite what was said, I think the underlying theme of God's law was love. It always has been and it always will be. Think about the 10 Commandments. Don't steal. Don't lie. Doesn't work. Think about those things. God's law was written to guide people to a healthy, loving community. And Jesus came to show us how to live it in that time. And I believe God's Spirit calls us to learn how to live it in this time. That's the whole point of the loving presence of God continuing in this world. This is just not about religious practices at all. It's not about religious behaviors. It's not about pleasing a God who has the ability to choose whether we make it to heaven or end up in hell. This is not about that. Those are ancient ways of thinking about gods. This is different. We're in a new day and a new time. It's about love. It's about community, I'm convinced. I want you to hear what Samuel Gieri writes about this. Oh, wait, I left out my own words. And so being a Christian, a follower of Jesus, is not about religious obedience or compliance. Being a Christian, a follower of Jesus, is all about learning to live in right relationship, in healthy, loving community with each other. Now we'll hear from Samuel. Religious practice, no matter how beautifully executed, in other words, no matter how well you do church or produce church, is meaningless when the love and mercy of the Lord are not extended as our own love and mercy. It's not about obeying the law. Religious folks of all stripes and patterns ought to pay close attention to this text. He's referring to that Isaiah 58 that I keep reading to you. Religious practice without the heart of God's love and mercy is empty. And I want you to hear what Amy Oden writes about this. Amy Oden writes a really good article. This is again referencing Isaiah 58, which Jesus is all about. God expects a partnership with restored and restorative people. People are participants in God's life, agents in God's desires for them. God calls us again and again into God's own life. See, I still believe that the most literal thing in the Bible is the statement that is made that God is love. I think that's the most literal thing. And listen, Amy's words are beautiful. God calls us again and again into God's own life, and God's own life is love. Again and again and again. In bringing forth God's purposes, God expects us to be partners. Even now, God expects us to be partners. Are you willing to partner with God to bring the law of love into a reality in this time and this place? Are you willing to dig deep all together now to discover how God is calling us to live faithfully today? What love asks of us together, how we are to partner with God in all of these things in our community, in our families, our homes, our relationships, our marriages, all of this, all together now, friends. Let's dig it up and learn more and grow more. I encourage you to remember and to hold true that you are valuable, you are deeply loved, and that all people are loved. And I encourage you to make sure they know that, to make sure they know that you love them too. Thank you guys for joining this morning. I hope this time has been helpful for you in understanding a little more about what Jesus might have been doing or saying, or even a little more about what God was intending. I believe in the Old Testament. I'm not alone. I've been learning this from other scholars. Well, I'm not a scholar, from people, other people who theologians and scholars who have been working on Bible study. These things are coming to me. These are changes in my beliefs because of Bible study. And I'm deeply grateful for the time that I have to do that. I'm also deeply grateful for all the piles of food in my office. I don't mind my office being used for that. It's great. So if you'd like to get involved here, you are always welcome. There's always an opportunity, and now even more opportunities. There's food moving around here somewhere almost every single day of the week. If you'd like to get more involved, we'd love to have you. Otherwise, get involved where you are in whatever way that you can, any way that you can serve and make love a reality in this world. It will change things, I promise. I'm sure of it. Take care, everybody. Much love to all of you. I really do look forward to seeing you soon.